Deep beneath the golden sands of Egypt, hidden within the crumbling walls of temples, and etched into the tombs of long-forgotten pharaohs, lie secrets that have baffled scholars for centuries. Picture this, symbols so ancient, so shrouded in mystery, that even the brightest minds today can't fully unravel their meanings. These aren't just carvings or decorations. They're messages from a civilization that mastered the art of encoding knowledge, leaving behind puzzles that whisper to us across thousands of years. What if I told you that some of these symbols hold power beyond our understanding, secrets so profound they were never meant to be decoded by the uninitiated? From the Ankh, the iconic looped cross symbolizing eternal life, to the enigmatic Eye of Horus, believed to ward off evil and heal the wounded, each symbol is a doorway into a world where magic and reality blurred. The ancient Egyptians didn't just write their history, they encrypted it in a language of symbols so intricate that modern archaeologists still argue over their true significance. Some believe these markings hold the keys to lost technologies, forgotten rituals, or even prophecies about the future. Others think they're remnants of a sacred code designed to protect knowledge from falling into the wrong hands. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: these symbols were never just art. They were a lifeline between the mortal world and the divine, a bridge to the gods themselves. And that's exactly what we're about to explore. Today, we're diving into 30 of the most mysterious symbols left behind by ancient Egypt, each one a tantalizing piece of a puzzle that may never be fully solved. Why were some symbols buried in the deepest chambers of pyramids, while others were displayed proudly for all to see? What hidden messages might still be lurking in plain sight, waiting for someone to crack their code? Together, we'll uncover the stories behind these cryptic designs, separating myth from reality while marveling at the ingenuity of a civilization that refused to let its secrets die. So settle in, because this isn't just a history lesson, it's a journey into the unknown where every symbol has a story and every story leads to another mystery. Ready to begin? Let's go. The Ankh, one of the most instantly recognizable symbols from ancient Egypt, yet its true meaning remains tantalizingly just out of reach. Often called the key of life, this looped cross appears everywhere in Egyptian art, clutched in the hands of gods and pharaohs alike, pressed against the lips of the dead as if to grant them breath in the afterlife. But was it a promise of physical immortality, a spiritual talisman, or something even deeper? Scholars still wrestle with this question today. Some argue the Ankh's top loop symbolizes the eternal soul, while the crossbar and descending line represent the mortal world, a bridge between heaven and earth. Others believe it may have been a literal key, unlocking hidden knowledge or divine power reserved for the worthy. What makes the Ankh even more fascinating is how it echoes across cultures and time. Look closely and you'll see its shape mirrored in modern crosses, though the connection is likely coincidence rather than design. Some theories suggest the Ankh's origins lie in something surprisingly mundane, a sandal strap. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs sometimes used everyday objects to convey abstract ideas, and the Ankh's loop does resemble a strap tied at the top. Yet, if that's the case, how did a simple sandal fastener become one of the most sacred symbols of a civilization? Perhaps because the Egyptians saw magic in the ordinary, transforming the practical into the profound. The debate doesn't end there. In temple carvings, gods are often shown offering the Ankh to a pharaoh's mouth, as if gifting them eternal life. But was this immortality literal, or was it about legacy, ensuring the pharaoh's name and deeds would never fade? In a culture obsessed with the afterlife, the Ankh might have been less about cheating death and more about transcending it, a reminder that some things endure even when bodies turn to dust. And then there's the mystery of its power. Why was the Ankh so universally revered, appearing in amulets, tomb paintings, and even the foundations of temples? Some researchers think it wasn't just a symbol but a tool, an object charged with energy capable of channeling the divine. Modern mystics still wear the Ankh today, believing it holds ancient secrets we've yet to rediscover. Whether it's a key, a shield, or a whisper from the past, one thing's certain: the Ankh refuses to be pinned down. It's a symbol that dances between worlds, as alive now as it was 4,000 years ago. The Eye of Horus, a symbol so precise it might as well have been crafted by the gods themselves. Unlike the Ankh's ethereal mystery, this ancient emblem carries a startling blend of myth, mathematics, and medicine. Often called the Wedjat or Whole One, the Eye of Horus wasn't just a spiritual protector, it was a mathematical marvel. According to legend, when the god Horus lost his left eye in a battle with his uncle Set, the god Thoth restored it, but not completely. A tiny fragment, 1/64th, was said to remain missing, and here's where it gets fascinating. The ancient Egyptians used the pieces of the eye to represent fractions in their mathematical system. Each part of the eye, the pupil, brow, and tear line, corresponded to a specific fraction, adding up to 63/64ths, that missing fraction. Some say it symbolized the magic of imperfection, the space where the divine could intervene. But the Eye of Horus wasn't just about numbers. It was deeply tied to the moon cycles, with its restoration mirroring the waxing and waning lunar phases. This connection made it a symbol of renewal, healing, and protection so powerful that Egyptians painted it on coffins, carved it into amulets, and even scribed it onto medical texts. Fast forward to today, and you'll find the Eye of Horus still watching over healers. Modern surgeons and pharmacists sometimes adopt it as a badge of precision, a nod to its ancient role in safeguarding health. Now, don't confuse it with the Eye of Ra. While they look similar, their meanings couldn't be more different. The Eye of Horus is gentle, restorative, a force of healing and balance. The Eye of Ra, though, its raw, untamed power. Associated with the sun god Ra, this version represents fury and destruction, a weapon wielded against chaos. One eye soothes, the other burns. Together, they embody the dual nature of the divine, creation and destruction, mercy and judgment. What's remarkable is how these symbols endure. The Eye of Horus isn't just a relic, it's a testament to how the ancients saw the universe, a place where math, myth, and medicine intertwined. Whether it's guiding a surgeon's hand or inspiring awe in a modern traveler, this symbol refuses to fade. It's a reminder that some truths, no matter how ancient, never lose their power. The Scarab beetle, an unlikely hero in the pantheon of Egyptian symbols, yet this humble dung-rolling insect held a place of reverence that rivaled the gods themselves. At first glance, it's hard to imagine why a creature associated with waste became one of ancient Egypt's most sacred emblems. But the Egyptians saw something extraordinary in the scarab's daily ritual. Each morning, as the beetle painstakingly rolled its ball of dung across the ground, it mirrored the journey of the sun god Khepri, who pushed the solar disk across the sky from dawn to dusk. To the ancient observers, this wasn't just coincidence, it was divine mimicry, a living symbol of rebirth and renewal. This connection to the sun's cycle made the scarab a powerful emblem of creation. Khepri, often depicted with a scarab for a head, was believed to renew the sun each day, just as the beetle renewed life from decay. The scarab's habit of laying its eggs inside the dung ball, only for new beetles to emerge, cemented its role as a symbol of transformation. Death wasn't an end, it was a doorway, and the scarab held the key. But the scarab's influence didn't stop at mythology. These beetles were etched into the very fabric of Egyptian burial rites. Amulets carved from stone or molded from faience, a glazed ceramic, were placed within the wrappings of mummies, often positioned over the heart. These heart scarabs weren't mere decorations. Inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead, they served as spiritual armor, protecting the deceased during their perilous journey through the afterlife. The spells implored the heart not to testify against its owner during the weighing of the soul. a critical moment where one's fate was decided. For pharaohs, scarabs took on an even grander role. Jeweled versions, crafted from lapis lazuli or turquoise, were buried alongside rulers as symbols of their divine mandate. Some scarabs, like the famed pectoral scarab of Tutankhamun, were masterpieces of artistry inlaid with precious stones and gold. But perhaps the most intriguing were the commemorative scarabs, larger than life and inscribed with royal announcements, early propaganda tools proclaiming military victories or royal marriages, distributed across the kingdom. What's astonishing is how the scarab's legacy endures. Modern archaeologists still uncover these amulets by the thousands, each one a tiny testament to a civilization that saw the cosmos in a beetle's labor. From pushing the sun across the sky to guarding souls in the underworld, the scarab proves that symbols often carry meanings far beyond their earthly origins. It's a reminder that even the smallest creatures can roll the weight of the heavens. The Djed Pillar stands tall and stark in Egyptian art, 4 stacked segments rising like a backbone from the earth, a symbol so deeply tied to Osiris that it's often called his spine. But this wasn't just a representation of the god of the afterlife. It was a metaphor for unshakable stability in a world where chaos always lurked. During the Heb-Sed festival, pharaohs would perform a ritual raising of the Djed, a ceremonial act mimicking Osiris's resurrection, ensuring the kingdom's endurance. Imagine the scene, priests chanting, crowds watching as the pillar was lifted upright, a collective breath held because if the Djed stood firm, so would Egypt. Archaeologists have found these pillars carved into temple walls, painted on coffins, even woven into the very floor mosaics of palaces. Their message was clear: this symbol held up the weight of the cosmos. Yet the Djed rarely stood alone. Beside it in carvings and throne designs, you'd often find its counterpart. There was Scepter, a staff topped with the snarling head of the desert god Set. Where the Djed embodied order, there was Scepter was a weapon against disorder, a tool to subdue chaos. Its forked base anchored it to the ground, while the animal head served as a warning. Defiance would not be tolerated. Pharaohs clutched it in art as a sign of authority, but its power went deeper. In myths, gods used the was to vanquish demons. In rituals, it was a conduit for divine will. Together, the Djed and was formed a perfect duality, one to steady, the other to strike. What's fascinating is how these symbols merged in throne designs. A pharaoh's seat wasn't just furniture, it was a microcosm of the universe. Flanked by Djeds, the ruler became the axis of stability. Gripping the was, they commanded the forces of entropy. This pairing wasn't coincidence, it was a declaration. To rule Egypt was to balance creation and destruction, to be both the unmoving pillar and the unstoppable force. Even today, traces of this duality endure architecture echoing the Djed's steadfastness, symbols of authority borrowing the was's sharp clarity. These weren't just decorations. They were blueprints for power, etched into the bones of a civilization that knew the price of balance. The Tyet, often called the knot of Isis, bleeds crimson across ancient Egyptian artifacts, a symbol so potent it was believed to hold the very essence of life and rebirth. Unlike the Ankh's open loop, the Tyet's arms curve inward, twisting like an eternal knot, dyed red to mimic the blood of Isis herself. This wasn't just a stylistic choice. Scholars argue the color tied it to menstrual cycles, linking it to fertility and the primal power of creation. Imagine the reverence for a symbol that mirrored the rhythms of the female body, a force as sacred as the Nile's floods that birthed crops from barren land. But the Tyet's magic didn't stop at life, it stretched into death. In the Book of the Dead, it appears clutched in the hands of gods, woven into resurrection spells meant to stitch souls back together. One spell implores Isis to bind the Tyet around the deceased's neck that they may rise whole. The knot wasn't just decoration, it was a lifeline, its tight coils meant to hold the spirit intact during the perilous journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Amulets carved from carnelian, a stone the color of dried blood, were placed on mummies, their hue echoing the Tyet's sacred palette. Compare it to the Ankh and the differences speak volumes. Where the Ankh's loop breathes openness, the Tyet's twists suggest containment, a protective embrace. Some theories propose they were two halves of a whole, the Ankh granting life, the Tyet preserving it beyond death. In temple reliefs, they often appear side by side, Isis offering one while Osiris holds the other. Together, they form a silent dialogue between creation and preservation, a duality the Egyptians revered. Yet the Tyet's deepest mystery lies in its ambiguity. Was it a literal knot, a stylized womb, or a coded map of celestial paths? The answer may be all three. In a culture that saw symbols as living conduits, the Tyet defied singular meaning. It pulsed with the raw energy of lifeblood, the precision of a surgeon's suture, and the unfathomable promise of rebirth. Even now, millennia later, its twisted form whispers secrets we're only beginning to unravel. The Shen Ring encircles Egyptian art like an unbroken promise, a simple loop of rope with no beginning and no end. Yet it holds one of the most profound concepts in ancient symbolism, eternal protection. Unlike the Ankh or the Tyet, which carry layers of layered meanings, the Shen's power lies in its elegant simplicity, an infinite boundary, a shield against time itself. You'll spot it clutched in the talons of Nekhbit, the vulture goddess, her wings spread protectively over Pharaohs as the Shen dangles beneath her, a visual oath that their reign would never fray. But this wasn't just divine decoration. The Shen's circular form became the blueprint for cartouches, those elongated ovals that enclosed royal names. Think of it as ancient Egypt's version of a security seal. Once a name was wrapped in that sacred loop, it was safeguarded for eternity, untouchable by decay or oblivion. Zoom in on temple reliefs and you'll notice something peculiar. Gods often extend the Shen toward a pharaoh's mouth, mirroring the Ankh's life-giving gesture. But where the Ankh grants breath, the Shen offers something subtler permanence. It's as if the gods were whispering, "Your name will never dissolve in the winds of time." This obsession with legacy wasn't vanity, it was survival. Egyptians believed speaking a name aloud could resurrect the dead, so preserving it within the Shen's loop was a matter of cosmic insurance. The Shen's evolution into cartouches reveals even deeper genius. Early dynasties used simple rectangles for royal names, but by the 4th dynasty, the design curved into that familiar oval, essentially a stretched Shen. This wasn't an aesthetic upgrade. The oval's unbroken line mirrored the circuit of the sun, tying the king's identity to Ra's eternal journey. Clever, right? A name inside a cartouche didn't just belong to a mortal. It was etched into the fabric of the universe. Yet the Shen's most haunting iteration appears not on monuments, but on the fragile bodies of the dead. Funeral shrouds and sarcophagi often feature rows of Shen rings, linked like chains around the deceased. Some scholars argue these were eternity knots, each loop a plea to the gods to keep the soul's memory intact. Others see them as barriers, coiled like serpents to repel grave robbers or malevolent spirits. Whatever their purpose, one thing's clear: the Shen wasn't just art. It was a spell woven into rope, a single perfect shape holding back the void, and in a civilization that measured worth by endurance, that made it more valuable than gold. The feather of Ma'at, light as air yet heavy with the weight of eternity, was the ultimate measure of a soul's worth. Imagine standing in the Hall of Two Truths, the afterlife's courtroom, where your heart is placed on one side of a golden scale and this single ostrich feather on the other. If your heart balanced against Ma'at's feather, you'd earned paradise. If it sank, tipped down by the weight of wrongdoing, a monstrous beast named Ammit waited to devour you whole. But this wasn't just about morality. It was a cosmic audit where every lie, every act of greed, every moment of cruelty became physical weight. Why a feather? To the Egyptians, Ma'at wasn't just a goddess. She was the very concept of truth, order, and harmony. The ostrich feather, perfectly symmetrical and impossibly light, embodied her essence. It represented the ideal state of the universe, balanced, unburdened, pure. And here's where it gets fascinating. They believed the heart, not the brain, was the seat of memory and conscience. In their view, the brain was just tissue, but the heart recorded every deed, every thought, like a scribe's papyrus. That's why during mummification, the brain was discarded, while the heart was carefully preserved, wrapped in linen, and returned to the body. It was the only witness the gods would trust. Now, the stakes of this judgment weren't left to chance. The deceased didn't just walk in hoping for the best. They came armed with the 42 negative confessions, a list of declarations meant to prove their purity. These weren't generic promises, they were hyper-specific denials. I have not stolen grain, I have not caused tears, I have not belittled a god. Each confession addressed a different aspect of Ma'at's law, reflecting a society obsessed with social harmony. Some confessions were practical. I have not cheated in the marketplace. Others deeply spiritual. I have not blocked the flow of a river's truth. Together, they formed a moral blueprint, a guide for living in alignment with cosmic order. But the feather's legacy goes beyond mythology. Modern courts still use scales as a symbol of justice, a direct descendant of Ma'at's feather. And that idea of the heart as a record keeper, it echoes in our language today. Phrases like heavy heart or light-hearted feel almost Egyptian in their logic. The feather wasn't just a tool of judgment, it was a mirror forcing the living to ask, could my heart balance against truth itself? For the ancients, that question wasn't philosophical. It was the difference between oblivion and eternity. The Eight of Crowns sits atop Osiris's head like a layered puzzle, each piece whispering a different secret about kingship, divinity, and the fragile balance between life and death. At first glance, it looks like a fusion of three distinct elements: the towering white crown of Upper Egypt, a pair of sweeping red ostrich feathers, and a golden solar disk perched at its peak. But this wasn't just regal decoration. Every curve and plume carried meaning, transforming the crown into a map of cosmic power. The white base, shaped like a bowling pin, symbolized Osiris's authority over the fertile Nile and the afterlife, its pointed tip stretching toward the heavens like a conduit for divine energy. The red feathers, often curled like flames, represented Shu, god of air, and Ma'at's truth, their vibrant hue echoing the lifeblood of the land, and that solar disk. It tied Osiris to Ra himself, merging the god of resurrection with the sun's eternal fire. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. The Eight of Crowns didn't just belong to Osiris. During the Heb-Sed festival, a jubilee held after 30 years of a pharaoh's rule, the living king would don a version of this crown to channel Osiris's power. Imagine the scene: priests chanting, incense swirling as the pharaoh, dressed in ceremonial leopard skin, performed rituals meant to magically rejuvenate his strength. The crown wasn't just a prop, it was a battery, transferring the god's immortality to mortal flesh. Wall carvings at Abydos show this moment with eerie precision. The pharaoh's bent arms mimic Osiris's mummified pose, the Eight of Crowns glowing atop his head as if drawing energy from the underworld. But the crown's magic wasn't just in its shape. The materials told their own story. Texts describe the feathers as shining like the dawn, dyed with ochre to mirror the desert's raw power. The solar disk, often hammered from electrum, a mix of gold and silver, caught the light like a miniature sun, a visual reminder that the pharaoh straddled two worlds. Even the way it was worn held meaning. Unlike the sleek, peasant crown of unified Egypt, the Atef's asymmetrical feathers leaned slightly forward, as if straining toward the future. Some scholars argue this was intentional, a nod to Osiris's role as Lord of the Western Horizon, forever caught between setting and rising, death and renewal. What's haunting is how the crown's symbolism seeped into burial rites. Tomb paintings show Osiris wearing it as he judges souls, its feathers trembling like living things. In the Book of the Dead, spells invoke the Atef's protection, begging it to shield the heart from betrayal. Even the red color held duality, life-giving yet dangerous, like the Nile's floods or a wound that won't heal. The Atef crown wasn't just headgear, it was a contract, a promise that order could triumph over chaos, if only for another 30 years, and in a world where kings became gods, that was enough. The Uraeus cobra coils with lethal elegance atop the crowns of pharaohs, its hood flared wide in eternal warning, a symbol of raw, untamed power. But this wasn't just artistry. Live cobras slithered through royal ceremonies, their presence a visceral reminder of the throne's divine authority. Imagine the scene, a priestess carefully guiding an Egyptian cobra across a pharaoh's outstretched arms, its golden scales catching torchlight as the crowd held its breath. One strike could mean death, yet the serpent remained eerily still. To the Egyptians, this wasn't luck, it was proof the gods had chosen this ruler. The Uraeus, that stylized rearing serpent welded to headdresses and scepters, distilled this danger into a single, potent emblem, protection forged in venom. Legends say the Uraeus originated in a fiery act of defense. When Ra, the sun god, grew weary of humanity's rebellion, he ripped out his own eye and transformed it into a spitting cobra hather in a most terrifying form. This serpent goddess rained searing venom upon Ra's enemies, her poison melting flesh like wax. But here's the twist: when Ra relented, the cobra didn't vanish. She became his permanent guardian, coiled around his solar disk, poised to spit fire at any threat. That's why the Uraeus always faces forward in carvings, its fangs bared. It's not decoration, it's a loaded weapon aimed at chaos. The Uraeus's power bled into politics. Foreign ambassadors kneeling before the pharaoh wouldn't just see a man, they'd see that golden cobra glaring down, a silent message: cross this throne and the gods themselves will strike. Cleopatra weaponized this imagery, wearing twin Uraei on her crown to symbolize dominion over both Egypt and Rome. But the serpent's reach extended beyond intimidation. In temple healing rituals, priestesses invoked its venom as a paradox, a destroyer that could also cure. Texts describe diluting cobra poison into potions meant to purge illness, turning the symbol of death into a lifeline. Modern eyes might dismiss the Uraeus as a dramatic accessory, but its genius lay in duality. That raised hood mirrored the hieroglyph for goddess, tying its power to the divine feminine. The serpent's shed skin echoed rebirth, linking it to Osiris's resurrection myths. Even its strike was calculated. Artists always showed the Uraeus at the moment before attack, forever suspended between threat and action. This wasn't just a snake, it was a perfect metaphor for kingship, mercy, and violence balanced on a razor's edge. And in a land where symbols held palpable power, that made the Uraeus more than a guardian. It was the embodiment of rule itself, whispering a truth every pharaoh knew: to where the serpent was to dance with fire. The Sekhem scepter strikes like a thunderbolt through Egyptian art, a heavy, blunt weapon clutched in the fists of gods and kings, radiating raw, unapologetic authority. Unlike the graceful Ankh or the coiled Uraeus, this symbol had one clear purpose: to smash through resistance. Carved from hard stone or cast in bronze, its shape was brutally simple, a thick rod with a weighted end, like a judge's gavel forged for battle. When Anubis wielded it in tomb paintings, it wasn't just ceremonial, it was a warning. The hieroglyph for power literally depicted this scepter, and for good reason. Pharaohs buried with Sekhms weren't just claiming divine right, they were arming themselves for the afterlife's battles, ready to crush any force threatening their eternal reign. But Egypt's rulers knew power couldn't thrive on violence alone. Enter the crook and flail, the ultimate paradox of leadership. The crook, curved like a shepherd's staff, whispered of nurture, guiding flocks, pulling the lost from danger. The flail, with its dangling rods, evoked the threshing of grain, separating wheat from chaff. Together they danced between mercy and judgment. Osiris cradled them crossed over his chest in murals, a silent oath: I will protect, but I will also purify. What's brilliant is how these symbols played off each other. The sekhem was the clenched fist, the crook and flail were the open hand. In coronation rituals, new pharaohs received all three, a triad of sovereignty. The message, rule with strength but temper it with wisdom. Strike when needed but never forget your duty to feed and shield. Temple reliefs show the crook gently hooked around a subject's shoulders while the flail hovers above, a reminder that loyalty would be rewarded and betrayal winnowed away. Yet there's a dark irony here. The crook and flail, for all their pastoral symbolism, were often forged from gold and lapis lazuli luxuries far removed from dusty fields. Even the sekhem's brutality was polished to a gleam. Perhaps that's the unspoken truth beneath these symbols. Authority, no matter how benevolent, always shines brightest when backed by force. The Egyptians didn't shy from this duality. They enshrined it, knowing true power wasn't choosing between might and mercy, it was mastering both. The Ba bird soars through ancient Egyptian art with the head of a human and the body of a falcon, a hybrid creature defying the boundaries between earth and sky. Unlike the rigid statues of gods or the solemn mummies in their sarcophagi, the Ba symbolized something extraordinary, the soul's restless freedom after death. Imagine this winged spirit bursting from the tomb at dawn, stretching invisible wings to revisit the world of the living, only to return to its preserved body at nightfall. This wasn't just poetic imagery, it was a core belief etched into burial rituals. Small Ba statues, often carved from gleaming cedar or painted limestone, were placed beside mummies like loyal guardians. Their purpose, to serve as physical vessels for the soul's wanderings, ensuring the deceased could still savor the warmth of the sun or the laughter of descendants. What's striking is how the Ba bird blurred the lines between life and afterlife. While the Ka life force stayed bound to the tomb, needing offerings to survive, and the Ankh, the radiant, transformed spirit, ascended to the stars, the Ba was the restless in between. It could slip through stone walls, glide over the Nile, even converse with the living, if the spells in the Book of the Dead held strong. Tomb paintings show the Ba perched on tomb entrances or hovering near food-laden altars, its human face eerily alive with expression. Some texts describe it as the heart's voice, carrying petitions to the gods or whispering advice to grieving families, but the Ba's freedom came with risks. Without a preserved body to return to, the soul might dissolve into chaos. That's why mummification wasn't just about preserving flesh, it was about anchoring the Ba. Priests chiseled false doors into tomb walls, thin portals only the Ba could penetrate, and stocked burial chambers with letters to the dead, clay bowls inscribed with pleas like, "Father, visit me in dreams." Even the iconic canopic jars guarding the liver, lungs, and stomach played a role. These organs weren't just preserved, they were invitations luring the Ba back with the scent of its own body. The Ba bird's duality fascinates modern scholars. Its falcon body ties it to Horus, the sky god, while its human head mirrors the individual's unique identity. In a way, it's the ultimate paradox, a soul both unchained and eternally tethered. Some archaeologists argue the Ba statues weren't just art, they were functional, infused with Heka magic to animate the soul. X-rays of certain Ba figures reveal hollow cavity spaces possibly meant to hold fragments of the deceased's hair or nail clippings, binding the spirit to its form. Perhaps the most poignant Ba bird artifacts come from Amarna, Akhenaten's revolutionary capital. Unlike traditional Ba statues, these bear the sunken, elongated features of Amarna art, their wings spread as if bathed in Aten's rays. They're a reminder that even in a city that rejected Egypt's old gods, the soul's yearning for flight couldn't be erased. The Ba bird wasn't just a symbol, it was a promise that death might still the heart, but the soul would never stop seeking the sky. The lotus flower floats serene and radiant in Egyptian art, a bloom so sacred it was said to cradle the infant sun god Ra at the dawn of creation. Unlike the scarab's earthy labor or the Uraeus's venomous threat, the lotus embodied a quiet, cyclical magic. Picture the primordial waters of Nun, that endless dark ocean before time, and from its depths a single lotus emerges, petals unfurling to reveal Ra, the first light. This wasn't just poetic imagery, it was the Egyptians' answer to the mystery of existence. Every sunrise became a reenactment of that moment, the lotus's daily resurrection from murky waters mirroring the sun's triumphant return. But the lotus wasn't just a cosmic cradle. Its narcotic secret gave it a starring role in rituals. Blue lotuses, often depicted in banquet scenes, were steeped in wine or chewed raw to induce visions. Priests and priestesses inhaled their scent before oracle ceremonies, believing the flower could dissolve the veil between worlds. Tomb paintings showed dancers with lotus blossoms woven into their hair, their limbs swaying in ecstatic motion, perhaps a glimpse of the plant's psychoactive grip. Modern chemists have confirmed the blue lotus contains compounds like apomorphine, a mild hallucinogen that alters perception without dulling the senses. To the Egyptians, this wasn't recreation, it was sacred technology, a way to commune with gods who spoke in dreams. What's mesmerizing is how the lotus's life cycle became a metaphor for the soul's journey. By day, it basked in sunlight. By night, it submerged beneath the water, only to rise again untouched by decay. Mummies were often posed holding lotuses, their fingers curled around stems like passengers clutching tickets to the afterlife. The Book of the Dead describes the deceased transforming into a lotus, their spirit opening like petals in the field of reeds. Even the lotus's scent played a role. Funerary texts mention its perfume as the breath of the gods, a scent so pure it could mask the stench of death. The lotus's geometry held its own magic. Its spiral seed pod mirrored the Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical pattern found in galaxies and hurricanes. Artists rendered it with obsessive precision: 4 petals for the cardinal directions, 8 for the Ogdoad, the 8 primordial gods, or 1,000 in temple carvings to symbolize infinity. In the temples of Philae, pillars are crowned with lotus capitals, their stone petals forever frozen mid-bloom, as if the entire building might ascend to the heavens. Yet the lotus's legacy extends beyond Egypt. In Hinduism and Buddhism, it similarly represents enlightenment rising from murky waters. But the Egyptians gave it something darker, more visceral, a flower that wasn't just spiritual but pharmacological, not merely symbolic but transformative. It bridged the gap between the corporeal and the celestial, offering a way to taste the divine. Whether cradling the sun or unlocking visions, the lotus proved that even the most delicate beauty could hold the weight of creation. The Bennu bird rises from the ashes of its own legend, a radiant heron with plumage the color of sunrise, forever tied to the moment of creation itself. Unlike the earthly scarab or the celestial bar bird, this creature straddled myth and ritual with an almost playful ambiguity. Ancient texts describe it as a purple heron, yet its feathers shimmered gold and red in temple art, as if dipped in the first light of dawn. But here's what makes it extraordinary. The Bennu didn't just symbolize rebirth, it enacted it. According to the priests of Heliopolis, this bird emerged unaided from the flames that crackled atop the sacred Benben stone, a primordial pyramidion said to be the first thing to rise from the waters of chaos. That spontaneous eruption of life from fire became the blueprint for its legend. Every 500 years, the Bennu would return to Heliopolis, build a nest of cinnamon twigs and myrrh, and ignite itself in a blaze so pure it left only an egg behind. From that egg, the bird would rise anew, unchanged, eternal. Now, if this sounds familiar, there's a reason. The Greeks later adopted the Bennu into their own myths, transforming it into the phoenix. But where the phoenix was a solitary wonder, the Bennu was deeply woven into Egypt's cosmology. That Benben stone it crowned wasn't just a perch, it was the axis of the universe, the point where creation began. Temple reliefs show the bird perched atop it, its cry a sound like shattering crystal, marking the division between night and day. Some scholars argue the Benben was a meteorite, a celestial fragment worshipped for its otherworldly origins, and the Bennu's association with fire hints at this cosmic connection. The bird's ties to Ra add another layer. In one version of the myth, the Bennu is Ra's Ba, his soul manifest floating above the waters of none before time began. This duality, both creator and creation, made it a paradox even the Egyptians couldn't fully unravel. Priests at Heliopolis kept a shrine to the Bennu, where they burned sacred resins at dawn, mimicking its fiery rebirth. Mummies were sometimes adorned with heron feathers, a plea for the deceased to rise like the Bennu, untouched by decay. Yet the most haunting detail lies in its silence. Unlike the raucous cries of real herons, the Bennu was said to sing just once at its moment of immolation. That song, texts claim, held the secret of true names, the power to reshape reality. Perhaps that's why this bird endures in our collective imagination, not just as a symbol of renewal, but as a reminder that some fires don't destroy, they reveal. The 4 canopic jars stand silent guard over the mummified dead, each one capped with a distinct animal head, their hollow interiors cradling the very organs that once sustained life. These weren't mere containers, they were sacred vessels, each assigned to one of Horus's 4 sons, and entrusted with safeguarding a specific part of the body for the perilous journey to the afterlife. The jackal-headed Durmutef held the stomach, its sharp snout symbolizing protection against scavengers that might defile the organ's delicate contents. Hapi, the baboon, cradled the lungs in his jar, his wide-eyed visage perhaps a nod to the breath that once filled them. Imseti, with his human face, guarded the liver, a reflection of the Egyptians' belief that this organ housed emotions and conscience. And Kebesenuf, the falcon, kept watch over the intestines, his hooked beak evoking the precision needed to preserve such fragile tissue. Now, here's where Hollywood gets it wrong. Despite what movies show, the brain wasn't stored in these jars, or any jar for that matter. The Egyptians considered the brain unimportant, even disposable. During mummification, priests would insert a long hook through the nostrils, scrambling and extracting the brain in fragments before discarding it entirely. The heart, however, was treated with reverence, believed to be the seat of intelligence and morality. It remained inside the body, meticulously wrapped and sometimes even replaced with a heart scarab if the original was damaged. This distinction between organs, some preserved, others discarded, reveals a fascinating hierarchy of bodily sanctity. The jars themselves evolved over time. Early versions were simple clay pots, but by the New Kingdom they became works of art crafted from alabaster, limestone, or even faience, their stoppers carved with intricate animal features. Some sets, like those of Tutankhamun, were nestled inside gilded shrines shaped like miniature chapels, each jar tucked into its own compartment like a relic in a divine puzzle box. And while their primary role was practical, preventing decay during the 70-day mummification process, their symbolism ran deeper. Together, the 4 sons of Horus represented the cardinal directions, creating a protective shield around the deceased. Spells from the Book of the Dead were often inscribed on their surfaces, urging the gods to keep these organs safe, that they may serve their owner in the field of reeds. But perhaps the most intriguing twist lies in their later history. By the 3rd intermediate period, the practice of organ storage shifted. Mummies were found with their organs returned to the body cavity, wrapped in linen packets, while the canopic jars remained empty. Some scholars speculate this was a cost-saving measure. Others believe it reflected changing views of the afterlife, where physical preservation mattered less than spiritual unity. Yet the jars persisted, now serving as ceremonial placeholders, their animal heads still watching, still waiting. Even in emptiness, they whispered a promise that every part of the self, even the most visceral, had a place in eternity. The Ma'at necklace drapes across the chest like a celestial waterfall, a cascade of beads so heavy it required a counterweight at the back, yet so sacred it was considered a direct line to the goddess Hathor herself. Unlike the rigid formality of royal collars or the simplicity of amulets, the Ma'at was designed for motion. Priests and priestesses would grasp its beaded strands during rituals, shaking it like a sistrum to produce a rhythmic rustling said to mimic the whisper of the divine. But this wasn't just musical theater. Every bead, every twist of faience or lapis lazuli was a star in miniature, strung together to mirror the constellations Hathor ruled over. When swung in ceremony, the Ma'at didn't just make noise, it pulled the heavens down to earth. At the temple of Dendera, Hathor's cult center, frescoes show the goddess offering her Ma'at to worshippers, its beads glowing like a captured galaxy. The symbolism here is layered. The necklace's sheer weight, often stretching from collarbone to waist, wasn't just decorative. It echoed the physical burden of fertility and childbirth, realms Hathor presided over. Women struggling to conceive would wear replicas during prayers, hoping the goddess's power might flow through the beads into their bodies, and the counterweight. That wasn't mere practicality. Shaped like a keyhole or an inverted lotus, it anchored the necklace's energy, ensuring the wearer wouldn't be overwhelmed by the cosmic forces they'd invoke. What's mesmerizing is how the Ma'at blurred the line between jewelry and tool. The sistrum, its sister instrument, was shaken to ward off chaos with metallic clangs. But the Ma'at's softer sound was one of summoning a call to Hathor to descend, to bless, to awaken life. Its bead patterns weren't random. Temple records describe specific arrangements tied to the heliacal rising of Sirius or the path of the Big Dipper, turning the necklace into a wearable star map. During the beautiful festival of the valley, celebrants would dance with Ma'ats under the night sky, their beads catching firelight to replicate the very stars they honored. Yet the Ma'at's magic extended beyond fertility rites. In the Book of the Dead, spells mention it as a weapon of resurrection, capable of restoring speech to the silent and breath to the still. Some scholars argue the counterweight symbolized the northern sky, an eternal anchor for the soul, while the beads represented the cyclical southern constellations. Together, they formed a microcosm of the universe, one that could be worn, shaken, and wielded. Even Cleopatra, no stranger to divine theatrics, was depicted holding a Ma'at, its beads mingling with her royal regalia as if to remind Rome that Egypt's gods still held sway. Today, you'll find Ma'at replicas in museums, their colors faded but their purpose still palpable. They're a reminder that for the ancients, adornment was never just about beauty. It was about harnessing the invisible, about wearing the night sky as a shield or a prayer, and in the case of the Ma'at, about shaking the stars themselves into song. The Akhit horizon stretches across temple walls like a sacred gateway, two towering mountain peaks cradling the sun's blazing disk between them, a symbol so precise it feels less like art and more like a celestial map. This wasn't just a pretty depiction of sunrise, it was the Egyptians' blueprint for the boundary between worlds. The word Akhit itself means the place of becoming, a liminal space where the sun was reborn each dawn and where the dead began their journey into the Djed, the shadowy realm of the underworld. But the genius of this symbol lies in its duality. Those mountain peaks, they weren't generic. Scholars argue they represent the specific silhouette of the Giza Plateau, with the Great Pyramid and its companion monuments forming a man-made echo of this holy threshold. Look closely at the alignment of the pyramids, and the connection becomes eerie. During the equinoxes, the sun rises directly between the peaks of Khufu and Khafre's pyramids when viewed from the Sphinx, mirroring the Akhit glyph with uncanny precision. This wasn't coincidence, it was architectural alchemy. The pyramids didn't just house pharaohs, they became physical manifestations of the Akhit, turning Giza into a portal where the earthly and divine collided. Ancient texts describe the Djed's entrance as a western mountain, and what lies west of Giza, the vast Sahara, a desert the Egyptians associated with the afterlife's barren landscape. The Akhit symbol, then, wasn't just art, it was a GPS coordinate for the soul's final voyage. Now, here's where it gets even more fascinating. the sun disk nestled between the mountains isn't static. In some carvings, it's shown as the Scarab god Khepri, pushing the solar orb like his namesake beetle rolling dung, a visual pun linking creation to decay. Other versions depict the disk as the Eye of Horus, half submerged as if emerging from the underworld's waters. This fluidity hints at the Ankh's true power. It wasn't just a location, but a moment. The instant when night tipped into day, when the dead shimmered into existence beside the living. Priests at Heliopolis reenacted this daily, chanting as dawn broke over obelisks positioned to catch the first light, their chants urging the sun to cleave the Ankh once more. But the symbol's darkest secret lies in its tie to the dead. Funerary texts describe the Ankh as a mountain of fire, a trial the deceased had to cross before facing Osiris's judgment. Some pyramid corridors angle precisely to frame the Ankh's silhouette at certain times of year, suggesting they were designed as resurrection machines, channeling the sun's power to ignite the pharaoh's soul. Even the Great Pyramid's air shafts align with stars like Sirius and Orion, funneling cosmic energy through the Ankh's imagined peaks. What's haunting is how the Ankh's meaning evolved. By the New Kingdom, it wasn't just a gateway, it was a weapon. Spells in the Book of the Dead instruct the deceased to pierce the Ankh's belly, using its energy to repel demons. Tomb paintings show the mountain peaks morphing into the outstretched arms of Nut, the sky goddess, swallowing the sun only to birth it anew. The Ankh wasn't just a symbol of transition. It was the engine of the universe, a perpetual motion machine cycling between death and rebirth. And in the shadow of the pyramids, that cycle feels almost tangible, as if the stones themselves remember how to whisper the sun back to life. The god Her kneels forever in Egyptian carvings, his body bent as if bearing the weight of eternity itself, a living hieroglyph for infinity. Unlike the other gods who stand tall in temple reliefs, Her's posture is one of perpetual exertion, his arms raised to support the sky while palm fronds, the ancient Egyptian symbol for millions, sprout from his hands like branches of time. These fronds weren't just decorative, they were a numerical code, each notch representing a cycle of years stretching into the endless future. Imagine the precision of a civilization so obsessed with permanence that they personified infinity as a deity with muscles straining under the burden of time. But here's the twist. Her's name also means flood, linking him to the very force that could erase all things, a paradox that the Egyptians revered. Temples depicted him crouching beneath the throne of pharaohs, his presence a silent vow that their rule would endure as long as the cosmos itself. Yet Her's eternity was born from chaos. Beneath his kneeling form, the dark, churning waters of Nun stretched into the void, the formless abyss that existed before creation. Nun wasn't just a god, he was the embodiment of primordial disorder, a liquid night so vast it swallowed light and time. The Egyptians feared and revered these waters in equal measure. Though Nun birthed the first mound of land, the Benben stone from his depths, he remained an ever-present threat, his tides licking at the edges of the ordered world. Pyramid texts describe the sun god Ra sailing his solar bark through Nun's black currents each night, the serpent Apep lurking beneath, ready to drag the sun into oblivion. This duality, Nun as both source and destroyer, made him a paradox. Without his chaos, creation couldn't exist, yet if his waters ever rose too high, they'd swallow the world whole. The relationship between Her and Nun reveals the Egyptians' genius for balance. In temple art, they often appear as mirror images. Her's body strains upward, holding infinity aloft, while Nun's waters swirl below, a reminder that order and chaos are two sides of the same coin. The hieroglyph for universe literally combined their symbols, Her's palm fronds floating above Nun's waves, as if to say existence itself was a fragile negotiation between the two. Even the pharaoh's crown carried this tension. The Djed, the white crown of Upper Egypt, was said to be woven from reeds that grew where Nun's waters met Her's ordered shore. What's haunting is how these symbols bled into daily life. Amulets of hair were placed in tombs, their tiny palms outstretched to grasp eternity for the deceased. Meanwhile, priests performed rituals to push back nuns' flood, pouring water libations into specially marked pits that symbolized containment. The message was clear: civilization wasn't a given. It was a daily act of defiance against the void. Even the annual Nile floods, which fertilized crops, were seen as nuns-controlled intrusion, enough chaos to sustain life but never enough to drown it. Modern eyes might dismiss these as mere myths, but their legacy lingers. The Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, a symbol later adopted by alchemists, first appeared in Egypt as a fusion of hair's endless cycles and nuns' devouring depths. And in a world grappling with climate change and cosmic uncertainty, the dance between these two forces feels eerily prescient. The Egyptians understood what we're relearning, that infinity isn't just a concept. It's a labor and chaos, it's always one tide away. The Seba star blazes across temple ceilings and tomb floors, a five-pointed cipher that guided souls through eternity's labyrinth. Unlike modern depictions of stars, this symbol wasn't just decorative. It was a celestial road sign, each point representing a pathway the deceased could travel in the afterlife. Archaeologists have found these stars meticulously painted in blue and gold, clustered like constellations in burial chambers, their positions mirroring real astronomical alignments. But here's the mystery: why 5 points when the night sky offered infinite shapes? The answer lies in the Egyptian concept of the Djed, the underworld's 5 regions, each governed by a different deity. The Seba's points acted as arrows, directing the soul through gateways of fire, darkness, and judgment toward Osiris's throne. Now, contrast this with the Ogdoad star, an 8-pointed emblem so rare it appears only in the deepest layers of Egyptian cosmology. Where the Seba was a traveler's map, the Ogdoad was a birth certificate. It symbolized the 4 pairs of primordial gods who existed before creation: chaos and stillness, darkness and invisibility, the floodwaters and their boundless depths. These 8 forces swirled in the void until they collided, igniting the first sunrise. The Ogdoad star's 8 points, they're the moment of explosion frozen in time, each ray a thread of the universe's fabric. Temple carvings in Hermopolis, the cult center of these gods, show the star radiating from the mouth of Thoth, as if speech itself could summon cosmic order from chaos. The Seba and Ogdoad stars reveal a duality at the heart of Egyptian thought. One was practical, a tool for navigating death. The other was metaphysical, a snapshot of existence's first breath. Yet both shared a common thread: light. The Seba's glow mirrored the star's sailors used to steer by, while the Ogdoad's spikes evoked the sun's rays piercing Nun's waters. Even their materials whispered secrets. Seba stars were often silver, reflecting the cool gleam of the Milky Way, while Ogdoad symbols were carved from meteoritic iron, that rarest of metals that fell from the sky like divine debris. What's haunting is how these stars intersected in ritual. During the opening of the mouth ceremony, priests held up 5-pointed wands to animate statues, while 8-sided altars channeled the Ogdoad's primordial energy. The message was clear: creation and resurrection were 2 faces of the same mystery. A pharaoh's coronation might invoke the Ogdoad's chaos to legitimize his rule, but his tomb's ceiling would glitter with Seba stars, a promise that even kings needed guidance in the dark. The star's legacy lingers in unexpected places. Medieval alchemists adopted the 5-pointed Seba as a symbol of the elements, unknowingly echoing its Egyptian role as a bridge between realms. And that 8-pointed Ogdoad, some scholars argue it resurfaced in Islamic art as the Rub el-Hizb, another emblem of divine order. These weren't just pretty shapes. They were the ancient world's quantum physics equations etched in starlight, balancing the seen and unseen, the beginning and the endless. The Deshret crown burns crimson in the art of ancient Egypt. A rigid, cylindrical headpiece with a coiled spiral at its front dyed the color of dried blood. This wasn't just the royal emblem of Lower Egypt, it was a battle standard, a declaration of sovereignty written in the language of war. Unlike the pristine Djed crown of Upper Egypt, the Deshret's rough, basket-like design hinted at its origins in the marshy delta, where reeds were woven into helmets for early warrior kings. But by the time of unification, this crown had transformed into something far more potent, a symbol soaked in both political power and dark mythology. One of the most chilling tales tied to the Deshret comes from the contendings of Horus and Set, where the red crown becomes a weapon in a divine game of betrayal. The story goes like this. After Set murders Osiris and usurps the throne, Isis plots her revenge. She fashions a replica Deshret laced with poison and leaves it where Set will find it, a trap disguised as tribute. The power-hungry god, unable to resist the symbol of kingship, places it on his head. The toxins seep into his skin, bringing him to the brink of death until the other gods intervene. The irony is brutal. The very crown that represented Set's stolen authority becomes the instrument of his undoing. Beyond myth, the Deshret's red hue carried layers of meaning. Scholars debate whether the dye came from ochre, symbolizing the fertile silt of the Nile Delta, or from real blood, possibly of enemies, used in rituals to consecrate the crown's power. Temple reliefs show pharaohs wearing it during the said festival, a jubilee where aging rulers proved their vitality by running alongside a sacrificial bull, its throat slit to stain the earth the same crimson as the Deshret. The message was visceral. This crown wasn't just worn, it was earned through sacrifice and strength. Archaeological finds add another twist. In the tombs of early Delta kings, archaeologists uncovered Deshret-shaped vessels filled with powdered hematite, a mineral linked to both warfare and resurrection. Some theories suggest these were shadow crowns, meant to arm the pharaoh in the afterlife with the same authority he wielded in life. Others argue the powder was mixed into ceremonial paint, transforming the ruler's face into a living embodiment of Lower Egypt's fury. What's fascinating is how the Deshret's legacy endured even after unification. When Narmer, the first pharaoh of a united Egypt, donned both the red Deshret and white Djed, he didn't blend them into a new design. He stacked them, letting the crimson of the delta sit beneath the white of the south, a visual metaphor for the Nile's flow from Upper Egypt's purity to Lower Egypt's bloody frontier. The Deshret never lost its edge. Long after the kingdoms merged, rebels and rival dynasties would resurrect it as a rallying cry, proof that some symbols hold power even when their kingdoms fade. The Sematoi symbol pulses like a living thing in Egyptian art, a pair of lungs tethered to a windpipe, entwined with the papyrus of Lower Egypt and the Lotus of Upper Egypt, bound together by the coils of a single rope. This wasn't just a medical diagram or a political emblem. It was a breathing, organic map of the kingdom's unity, as vital as the air in the body. The Egyptians didn't just depict their nation as lines on a map, they imagined it as a respiratory system, with the Nile as its trachea, the Delta and Thebes as opposing lungs, and every citizen a cell in its bloodstream. When pharaohs carved the Sematoi into throne bases or wrapped it around their scepters, they weren't just claiming dominion, they were performing divine CPR, binding the land's fractured halves into one living organism. Temple pillars tell the story in stone. At Karnak and Luxor, colossal columns rise like petrified forests, their surfaces carved with papyrus stalks knotted to lotus stems, an arboreal metaphor for the Sematoi's message. The papyrus, thriving in Lower Egypt's marshes, twists around the lotus, Upper Egypt's emblem, their stems merging into a single, unbreakable column. But look closer and you'll notice something unsettling. The plants aren't just intertwined, they're strangled. The binding rope, often carved so deeply it seems to cut into the stone, mirrors the hieroglyph for unite, a word the Egyptians wrote with the same knotting gesture. This wasn't gentle harmony, it was forced symbiosis, a reminder that unity sometimes demands tension. The symbol's medical precision is no accident. The windpipe, depicted with meticulous cartilage rings, mirrors the Nile's segmented flow through the gnomes, while the lungs' lobes echo the fertile fan of the delta and the narrow valleys of the south. In temple rituals, priests would lay ceremonial models of the Sema toy on the pharaoh's chest during coronations, aligning his breath with the land's. The message was visceral. Just as air sustains the body, the king's rule sustained Egypt's unity. Even the hieroglyph for life, the Ankh, might derive from the Sema toy's silhouette, suggesting that existence itself depended on this fragile knot. Yet the Sema toy's darkest meaning lies in what it hides. Bound plants decay faster than free ones, and the Egyptians knew this. The symbol's tension wasn't just artistic, it was a warning. Rebellion, like rot, could spread if the binding slackened. That's why the pharaoh's titulary included "he who binds the two lands," and why traitors' tombs were often defaced with broken Sema toy carvings. The symbol wasn't just celebration, it was vigilance. Modern eyes might miss the genius in its design. The Sema toy isn't static, it's kinetic. The rope's coils seem to tighten and loosen depending on the angle of light, and the plants strain against their binds as if alive. In a way, they were. The Egyptians saw sovereignty not as a fixed state, but as a breath, drawn, held, and exhaled over and over forever. The cartouche wraps a royal name in an unbroken loop, a golden oval that sealed a pharaoh's identity against the erasing tides of time. Unlike the Shen Ring's simplicity, this elongated frame was a fortress of language, its coiled rope design echoing the eternal circuit of the sun. But the cartouche wasn't just about grandeur, it was survival. Egyptians believed speaking a name aloud could resurrect the dead, but erasing it doomed them to oblivion. That's why enemy kings would chisel out cartouches from monuments, a spiritual assassination meant to sever their foes' afterlife. Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten, suffered this fate after his radical monotheism fell from favor. His cartouches scraped away so thoroughly that only ghostly impressions remained. The Rosetta Stone's cartouches became keys to unlocking a lost language. When Napoleon's soldiers unearthed this slab in 1799, scholars fixated on the oval frames enclosing Ptolemy and Cleopatra's names. These weren't arbitrary decorations, they were linguistic lifelines. Jean-François Champollion noticed the cartouche's hieroglyphs matched phonetic sounds in the Greek text below, a revelation that cracked hieroglyphic code wide open. Suddenly, a symbol meant to shield names from destruction became the doorway to resurrecting an entire civilization's voice. What's often overlooked is the cartouche's evolution. Early dynasties used simple rectangles for royal names, but by the 4th dynasty, the design curved into an oval, essentially a stretched Shen ring, binding the king's identity to cosmic cycles. The oval's shape mirrored the sun's path, while the knotted rope symbolized the god's grip on the ruler's destiny. In Tutankhamun's tomb, his cartouches weren't just inscribed, they were woven into beaded sandals, so every step stamped his name into eternity. Yet the cartouche's true genius lay in its adaptability. When foreign rulers like the Ptolemies took Egypt's throne, they didn't discard the tradition, they weaponized it. Cleopatra's cartouches flaunted hybrid hieroglyphs blending Egyptian and Greek phonetics, a political sleight of hand to legitimize her rule. Meanwhile, hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings reveal unfinished cartouches. Space left blank to insert a pharaoh's name posthumously, a bureaucratic loophole for kings who died mid-reign. Modern archaeology still grapples with these oval enigmas. Infrared imaging recently exposed faint cartouches beneath layers of plaster in Luxor, revealing names thought erased forever. Each rediscovery is a whisper that even the mightiest symbols can't always silence history. The cartouche endures not just as art, but as a testament to humanity's oldest fear being forgotten, and its oldest hope that a name properly guarded might outlast the stars. Though a scepter stands rigid in ancient carvings, its forked base splitting the earth like the claws of a predator, a weapon disguised as a staff. At first glance, the design seems purely functional. The bifurcated end anchors it to the ground, a practical feature for ceremonial use. But the Egyptians never settled for practicality alone. That fork was a deliberate nod to the tools used by hunters and herdsmen to pin snakes or steer unruly cattle, transforming the scepter into a metaphor for a pharaoh's duty to subdue chaos without extinguishing its vital energy. Now consider the snarling Seth animal head crowning the scepter, a creature with curved snout, square ears, and a blade-like tail, embodying the god of storms and disorder. This choice seems contradictory. Why arm a symbol of authority with the visage of chaos itself? The paradox reveals the Egyptians' nuanced understanding of power. Seth wasn't just a villain, he was a necessary force. He defended Ra's solar bark from the serpent Atef each night, proving that destruction could also be protective. Though a scepter, then, wasn't just about dominance, it was about harnessing chaos as a shield. Temple scenes depict pharaohs gripping the scepter during the said festival, a ritual to renew their strength after 30 years of rule. As priests chanted, the ruler would strike ceremonial mounds representing enemy territories, the Seth head's grimace flashing in torchlight. Yet these weren't acts of mindless aggression. The forked base ensured each blow landed with precision, a reminder that true authority required control, not brute force. Even the scepter's materials whispered duality, often crafted from acacia wood, a tree linked to both life, its shade sheltered sacred spaces, and death, its thorns mimicked Seth's bristling energy. What's haunting is how the scepter's symbolism evolved during times of crisis. When Hyksos invaders seized the delta, rebel pharaohs like Sekhen and Tau wielded scepters with exaggerated Seth heads, their features twisted into grotesque snarls. Archaeologists found one such scepter buried in a cache at Dra Abu el Naga, its base stained with resin, possibly from a ritual to awaken Seth's fury against the occupiers. Later, during the Ramesside era, the scepter softened. The Seth head grew smaller, its muzzle blunted, reflecting the dynasty's uneasy truce with the god's cult. Though a scepter's legacy lingers in unexpected places, its forked design echoes in the crooks of modern shepherds, and the Seth head's primal snarl resurfaces in gargoyles adorning medieval cathedrals. But perhaps its deepest lesson lies in the tension between its parts, the base rooting it to order, the head howling with chaos. Together, they form a perfect equation, one the Egyptians understood instinctively. To rule was not to erase disorder, but to hold it by the throat, close enough to wield, never close enough to be consumed. The Meretseja cobra coils silently atop the Theban cliffs, a goddess carved from the very rock she guards, her hood flared not in warning but in judgment. Unlike the Uraeus cobra adorning royal crowns, Meretseja wasn't a symbol of political power. She was something far more primal, the embodiment of the mountain itself, a deity who whispered in landslides and struck with the precision of a scorpion's tail. Her name meant she who loves silence, yet her justice was anything but quiet. Tomb robbers who dared plunder the Valley of the Kings would awaken to searing pain, their eyes milking over with blindness, their limbs trembling with paralysis. Surviving graffiti near Deir el-Medina, the workman's village, tells chilling confessions. Meretseja struck me and I called to her. She healed me only when I renounced my theft. This duality, healer and executioner, made her unique among Egyptian deities. While most gods demanded temples, Meretseja dwelled in the raw wilderness, her sanctuary the jagged peak now known as Elquon, which looms over the valley like a silent sentinel. Workers who built the pharaohs' tombs would leave offerings at the mountain's base, tiny faience cobras, loaves of bread hardened by the sun, even drops of water poured onto parched stone. These weren't bribes, they were desperate bargains. To labor in the valley was to walk her razor's edge. One misstep could trigger a rock slide from her brow. as texts describe it, burying trespassers beneath the weight of her fury. Yet the same hands that carved curses into tomb walls also penned hymns praising her mercy. When the artisan Neferubu went blind after stealing lapis lazuli from a noble's grave, he commissioned a stela depicting Meretseger coiled around the hieroglyph for health, her fangs retracted. The inscription recounts how, after days of agonized prayer, his sight returned. Like the moon emerging from clouds, archaeologists found similar stelae dotting the cliffs, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of desperate touches. The lesson was clear. Meretseger's venom carried antidotes, but only for those who proved their repentance was deeper than their greed. What's haunting is how her punishments mirrored the natural horrors of the valley. The blindness she inflicted wasn't metaphorical, it mirrored ophthalmia, a real condition caused by sandstorms scouring corneas. The paralysis, likely inspired by encounters with actual cobras, whose neurotoxins induced terrifying immobility. Meretseger didn't just punish, she weaponized the desert itself, turning its dangers into divine retribution. Even her healing followed this logic. Texts describe her saliva as the cool north wind, a reference to the sudden relief when burning sands finally still. By the New Kingdom's end, as tomb robbing grew rampant, Meretseger's cult faded, perhaps because not even a mountain goddess could stem the tide of human desperation. But climb Elquarn at dawn, and you'll still see shadows pooling in the crevices like coiled serpents waiting. The workman's village lies in ruins, their stelae long silenced, yet the cliffs remember. Because Meretseger was never just a myth, she was the land's own voice, hissing a warning across millennia. Some treasures are guarded not by gold, but by the very earth that holds them. The Acre lions stand sentinel on either side of the horizon, twin beasts of golden sandstone, their muscular backs pressed together as they guard the gates where the sun rises and sets. Unlike solitary divine creatures, these lions exist as a pair, eternally facing opposite directions to watch over the thresholds of day and night. Their very form is a riddle carved in stone, two bodies sharing one name, Acre, the ancient earth god who personified the liminal space beneath the world where the sun traveled after dusk. Imagine the scene, Ra's solar bark sinking between the lion's paws at sunset, only to emerge reborn from their jaws at dawn, completing an endless cycle of death and renewal. These lions weren't mere symbols, they were cosmic bouncers. Tomb paintings depict them with their mouths stretched wide, not in roars but as literal doorways, their teeth framing the hieroglyph for horizon, the same Ankh symbol of mountain peaks cradling the sun. This overlap is no accident. The lions' intertwined bodies formed a living version of the Ankh gateway, their arched spines echoing the curve of the horizon. Some scholars argue the Great Sphinx of Giza, with its lion's body and human face, is a later evolution of Acre's dual nature, guardian of the east where the sun rises, and the west where it descends into the underworld. What's haunting is how Acre's duality bled into burial rites. Funerary texts describe the lions as the yesterday and tomorrow of Osiris, their opposing gazes ensuring the deceased wouldn't be lost in time's flow. Amulets shaped like the Acre lions were placed under mummies' heads, their jaws slightly parted to allow the soul passage. Even the air between the lions held meaning. Priests called it the breath of Acre, a current said to carry the sun's first and last light. But the lion's deepest secret lies in their silence. Unlike other protective deities, Acre rarely speaks in myths. His power is in stillness, in the weight of his paws pinning chaos to the earth. Perhaps that's why desert travelers reported seeing mirages of lions at dusk, not hunting, not fleeing, just waiting. The Egyptians understood, some forces don't need to roar to command the sky. The Pesesh Kef knife glints in the dim torchlight of the embalmer's workshop, a curved flint blade so sharp it could slice through the veil between life and death. This wasn't some crude tool for cutting flesh. It was a sacred instrument, its edges honed to perform one of the most bizarre and intimate rituals of mummification, the opening of the mouth ceremony. Picture the scene: a priest, face obscured by the jackal mask of Anubis, leaning over the mummy's linen-wrapped head. With deliberate precision, he presses the Pesesh Kef's blade against the corpse's sealed lips, not to wound but to awaken. The goal: to restore the deceased's senses in the afterlife, granting them the ability to speak, eat, and breathe beyond the grave. What makes this ritual so haunting are the layers of symbolism packed into that single blade. The knife's name, Pesesh Kef, translates to the divider of the mouth, a chillingly literal description of its function, but its shape holds deeper meaning. The curved tip mimics the hieroglyph for to open, while the forked end echoes the twin fingers of the gods, poised to pry apart the jaws of oblivion. Some scholars believe the flint material was intentional, a nod to the stone tools of prehistoric times, as if the Egyptians were reaching back to their most ancient roots to cheat death itself. Now here's where it gets visceral. While the ceremony's most famous act involved touching the mummy's mouth with the blade, earlier versions of the ritual were far more graphic. During the Old Kingdom, the Pesesh Kef was used to slice away the tongue of the deceased, a practice that sounds grotesque until you understand the reasoning. The Egyptians feared the dead might be forced to confess their sins in the afterlife, so removing the tongue was a grim insurance policy against divine interrogation. Later, this brutal act was replaced by a symbolic gesture, but the knife's edge still carried the echo of that older, darker magic. The knife's role didn't end with the mouth. In some burials, miniature Pesesh Kef blades were placed near the hands or feet of the mummy, tiny flint shards, meant to serve as backups in case the soul lost its way. Archaeologists have even found these knives buried with stillborn infants, a heartbreaking testament to the Egyptians' belief that even the smallest life deserved the tools to navigate eternity. What's fascinating is how the Pesesh Kef's legacy lingers in unexpected places. Its distinctive shape appears in temple carvings as early as the predynastic period, long before the pyramids rose, suggesting its ritual use stretches back to the dawn of Egyptian civilization. And that forked design, it resurfaces in later tools used by midwives to cut umbilical cords, tying the knife's symbolism full circle from the first breath to the last word. But perhaps the most unsettling detail lies in the blade's silent efficiency. Unlike the grand gestures of pyramids or the glitter of golden masks, the Pesesh Kef's power was in its simplicity. A single stroke, a whispered spell, and the dead could speak again. In a civilization obsessed with memory, that was the ultimate act of defiance, not just preserving the body, but reclaiming the voice from the silence of the tomb. The Bennu boat glides through the underworld's black waters, a vessel unlike any other, its prow carved into the fierce silhouette of Sokar, the falcon-headed god of the darkest necropolis. Unlike Ra's golden solar bark that blazes across the sky, this boat moves in silence, its hull woven from shadows and its sails stiff with the breath of the dead. But here's the twist: the Bennu isn't just a ferry for souls. It's a living paradox, a solar boat that navigates the deepest chasms of the Djed, carrying not just the deceased but fragments of the sun itself. Texts describe it docking at the Mounds of Light, eerie islands floating in the void where Sokar's secrets are buried. These mounds aren't geographical features, they're psychic landmarks, glowing pyramids of compressed time where the sun's energy is stored like coiled serpents. The Book of the Dead mentions them as stopping points where the Bennu's crew, a cadre of jackal-headed priests, perform rituals to unstitch the light, releasing just enough to fuel Ra's nightly passage without igniting the underworld. Imagine the scene, the boat's falcon figurehead glowing faintly as priests chant over chests of radiance, their voices swallowed by the cavernous silence. Sokar's connection to the Bennu reveals the Egyptians' genius for duality. As a god of both burial pits and resurrection, his falcon form merges the predatory swiftness of Horus with the decay of the grave. The boat's design reflects this, its stern often shaped like a crescent moon, a nod to Thoth's role in rebuilding Osiris's dismembered body. Even the oars defy logic. Tomb paintings show them bending like reeds, as if rowing through something thicker than water. Scholars suggest this represents the Djed's viscous, dreamlike substance, where movement requires as much magic as muscle. The most haunting detail lies in the Henu's cargo. Beneath its deck, hidden in compartments lined with lead, a metal the Egyptians associated with secrecy, sit sun eggs, crystalline orbs said to contain Ra's exhausted light, harvested each dusk to be rekindled at dawn. During the Osiris mysteries, priests would bury replicas of these eggs beneath temple floors, symbolizing the god's potential to rise anew. X-rays of Sokkar's effigies from Saqqara reveal hollow chambers in their bellies, some still cradling tiny stone spheres. Were these ritual objects, or did the Egyptians believe they could trap divine energy itself? Yet the Henu's true power emerges in its absence. On the 5 epagomenal days, those dangerous dates outside the normal calendar, the boat was said to vanish, leaving the Djed adrift. During this void, tomb inscriptions warn the dead might mistake the mounds of light for false dawns, burning their fingers on stored rays. It's a chilling metaphor for the fragility of cosmic order, and a reminder that even the sun's journey depends on Sokkar's shadowy craft. Modern excavators searching for the Henu's physical counterpart have found eerie parallels. Beneath the step pyramid's labyrinth, a fleet of miniature wooden boats was discovered, their falcon prows blackened by ritual fires. Nearby, alabaster vessels held powdered malachite, a green mineral linked to Sokkar's rejuvenation. These weren't toys, they were spiritual batteries charged to assist the Henu's work in the unseen world. The boat's legacy sails on. Sufi mystics in medieval Cairo whispered of a black bark haunting the desert's edge, its oarsmen neither living nor dead. Astronomers note that the Henus described route mirrors the Milky Way's arc over Giza, as if the Egyptians mapped the underworld onto the night sky. And in the quiet halls of museums, Sokkar's falcon gaze still follows visitors, a silent sentinel between the worlds of light and what lies beneath. The Sa symbol drifts through Egyptian art like a knotted promise, a looped bundle of papyrus stalks bound together with such precision it resembles a lifebuoy cast into the cosmic waters. At first glance, it could be mistaken for a simple representation of the Nile's marshes, where reeds were harvested for everything from paper to boats. But the Sa's true purpose was far more profound. It was a talisman of protection, a charm against drowning in both literal and spiritual floods. Amulets shaped like the Sa have been found clutched in the hands of mummies, their green faience surfaces inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead, urging the symbol to hold fast the breath of the drowned. This wasn't poetic metaphor. Egyptian medical papyri describe using actual papyrus bundles as flotation devices, suggesting the Sa's magic blurred the line between practical tool and divine intervention. What's fascinating is how the symbol's shape evolved. Early dynasties depicted it as a loose sheaf, but by the New Kingdom it tightened into a perfect loop, its overlapping stalks forming a continuous weave without beginning or end. This mirrored the Egyptians' obsession with cyclical renewal, the way papyrus plants would die back each year only to regrow from the same roots. Temple reliefs show gods like Tyet, the hippopotamus goddess of childbirth, holding the Sa over newborns as if tying their souls to the unbroken rhythm of life. Even the material held meaning. Sa amulets were often made from Nile mud mixed with ground papyrus, creating a physical tether to the river's life-giving power. Now here's where the Sa's journey takes an unexpected turn. When the Romans conquered Egypt, the symbol didn't vanish, it transformed. Early Coptic Christians adopted the loop design, reinterpreting it as the crux ansata, or cross with a handle. The resemblance to the Ankh is unmistakable, but the Coptic version elongated the Sa's lower stalk into a crucifix, merging pagan protection with Christian salvation. This wasn't accidental syncretism, it was strategic. To convert steeped in Egyptian symbolism, the crux Ansata whispered, "Your old gods guarded the body, but ours saves the soul." Scholars debate whether the saw's loop directly inspired the Celtic knot or the infinity symbol, but its influence is undeniable. In medieval alchemy, the tied reeds resurfaced as the Knot of Solomon, a symbol of unbreakable wisdom. Modern divers exploring Alexandria's sunken palaces have even found saw amulets among the ruins, their strands still tightly wound after centuries underwater, an eerie testament to the symbol's original promise. Perhaps that's the saw's greatest secret. It wasn't just a life preserver, but a time capsule carrying the essence of resilience across millennia. Whether as papyrus or cross, its message remains the same. Some bonds, once woven, refuse to unravel. Among the most baffling creatures to slink out of ancient Egypt's pre-dynastic era are the serpopod sinuous beasts with the muscular bodies of lions fused to the elongated necks of serpents, their gaping jaws forever frozen in silent roars on ceremonial palettes. These chimeras don't just defy nature, they defy easy explanation. Carved into artifacts like the legendary Nama palette, they coil around each other in perfect symmetry, their intertwined necks forming loops that mirror the Nile's winding course. But here's the mystery. Are these creatures native to the Nile's mythology, or did they slither into Egypt from the far older Mesopotamian world? The similarities to Mesopotamian art are impossible to ignore. Centuries before Nama's reign, Sumerian seals depicted lion-headed serpents known as Mushasu, guardians of temples and emblems of chaos subdued by gods. Like the serpopods, these beasts had serpentine necks and feline power, suggesting a cultural exchange along ancient trade routes. Some scholars point to the Uruk period, when Egyptian and Mesopotamian elites traded lapis lazuli and obsidian, and perhaps ideas. The serpopod's appearance on palettes used for grinding ceremonial pigments hints at their role in rituals blending foreign and local beliefs, yet the Nile offers its own clues. In the desert east of the delta, prehistoric rock art shows fantastical creatures with stretched necks, possibly early prototypes of the serpopod. The Egyptians revered both lions and serpents as solar symbols, lions for their connection to the horizon, serpents for their cyclical shedding, akin to the sun's rebirth. The serpopod's body might represent a fusion of these forces, a guardian straddling day and night. On the Nama palette, they're leashed by attendants, their necks bent toward a central depression where cosmetics were mixed, possibly a metaphor for taming chaos to create order, a theme central to Egyptian kingship. What's stranger still is their disappearance. After the early dynastic period, serpopods vanish from art entirely, replaced by more canonical creatures like sphinxes. Were they victims of political shifts as Egypt sought to erase foreign influences? Or did their symbolism become obsolete as the Nile's own myth solidified? Modern excavations at Hierakonpolis, where the Nama palette was found, unearthed fragments of other serpopod carvings, their styles slightly varied, proof that these weren't one-off anomalies but part of a forgotten bestiary. The debate rages on, but perhaps the truth lies in the hybrids themselves. Neither fully Mesopotamian nor purely Egyptian, they embody the fluidity of a time when borders were as mutable as mythology. Their coiled necks, knotted like the Sa symbol, might just be the earliest testament to an ancient truth, that cultures, like creatures, can evolve into something entirely new. From tattoo parlors to blockbuster films, ancient Egyptian symbols have been stripped of their sacred context and repackaged as exotic decoration or supernatural plot devices. Take the Ankh, once a revered emblem of eternal life, now inked onto forearms alongside zodiac signs and meaningless Sanskrit, reduced to just another cool-looking design. The Scarab beetle fares even worse in Hollywood's hands, transformed from a symbol of rebirth into a cursed artifact guaranteed to unleash plagues or resurrect mummies. These distortions aren't harmless. When symbols lose their original meaning, they become empty shells, divorced from the sophisticated belief system that birthed them. Archaeologists cringe at films like The Mummy, where scarabs burrow under skin to kill their victims, a far cry from the real amulets placed tenderly on mummies' chests to ensure safe passage. The Eye of Horus, meticulously tied to fractions and healing in ancient texts, gets reduced to a generic, all-seeing talisman in video games, stripped of its ties to lunar cycles and Thoth's mathematical genius. Even the Djed Pillar, a profound metaphor for stability, gets slapped onto energy drink logos with no understanding of its connection to Osiris's spine and the Heb-Sed festival's renewal rituals. Academics are pushing back against this symbol sensationalism. Dr. Rita Lukerli, a leading Egyptologist at UC Berkeley, calls it cultural flattening, the process of reducing complex spiritual icons to aesthetic trends or supernatural tropes. In 2019, the Griffith Observatory removed an Ankh from a sci-fi exhibit after scholars pointed out its misuse as a futuristic emblem, arguing it perpetuated the idea that non-Western symbols are fair game for appropriation. Meanwhile, museums like the Met have launched campaigns explaining the true context behind artifacts, using augmented reality to show how a Scarab amulet was actually worn or how the Ankh was held in temple ceremonies. But the battle isn't just against Hollywood. Wellness influencers tout the healing vibrations of hieroglyphs they can't read, while fashion brands stitch cartouches onto handbags without acknowledging they once held royal names meant to defy oblivion. The irony is thick. Symbols designed to combat erasure are now being erased themselves, their true significance drowned out by commercial noise, yet there's hope. Social media has become an unlikely ally, with Egyptologists like at Egypto Geek dissecting movie inaccuracies for millions of followers, and tattoo artists collaborating with scholars to design culturally respectful ink. The British Museum even partnered with a gaming studio to ensure the symbols in Assassin's Creed Origins matched archaeological records. It's a start, a reminder that these emblems aren't just props or pretty shapes. They're the fingerprints of a civilization that believed words and images held tangible power capable of bridging worlds. When we reduce them to empty trends, we don't just disrespect the past. We rob ourselves of the chance to understand a world where art wasn't just decoration, it was a lifeline to the divine. Even after centuries of deciphering hieroglyphs and analyzing tomb paintings, the true depths of these ancient Egyptian symbols continue to elude us. Part of their mystery lies in the very nature of how they were used, never as simple decorations, but as living, breathing vessels of meaning that shifted with context, ceremony, and the whispers of priests. Consider the Ankh's transformation from a sandal strap to a divine key, or how the Eye of Horus could simultaneously represent healing, fractions, and the moon's cycles. These symbols weren't designed to be fully understood by outsiders. They were layered like the chambers of a pyramid, each generation adding new interpretations while guarding old secrets. Take the serpent-headed Meretseja, for example, a goddess whose name was almost erased from history until graffiti in a workman's village revealed her lasting influence. Or the Bennu boat, whose solar cargo and shadowy voyages through the underworld still baffle researchers. These aren't just gaps in our knowledge, they're deliberate blind spots left by a civilization that believed some truths were too potent to be written plainly. Even the Rosetta Stone, our key to unlocking hieroglyphs, only gave us the vocabulary, not the full poetry of how these symbols were truly wielded in sacred spaces. And that's the magic of them. Every time we think we've pinned down a symbol's meaning, a new discovery, a faded papyrus, a hidden chamber upends our assumptions. Perhaps that's why they captivate us so deeply. They're not static relics, but conversations stretching across millennia, inviting us to lean closer and listen. So here's your invitation. Pick one symbol that resonates with you, maybe the Barbird's restless freedom or the Djed Pillar's unshakable stability, and dive deeper. Visit museum collections, read translations of the Book of the Dead, or even trace their echoes in modern art and spirituality. The more you look, the more these ancient designs will whisper back. And if you're hungry for more mysteries from lost civilizations to unsolved archaeological puzzles, don't forget to subscribe. The past has only begun to share its